The beach is pristine, the sunsets are like something from a movie, and everything seems perfect. But then, in the blink of an eye, the dream turns into a nightmare. The bride disappears. Gone without a trace. No warning. No sign. And as the husband stands on the edge of a cliff, searching the empty horizon, he uncovers something in a photo, a secret that sends chills down his spine, freezing him in place. This isn't just a love story. It's a mystery. A haunting puzzle. And the questions keep piling up. Where did she go? Why would she leave? And why is her wedding photo the key to unraveling it all? Hold on tight, because in this video, you're about to uncover the shocking truth behind one of the most mysterious disappearances you'll ever hear about. You've clicked on this video for a reason, right? You're here because you want to know the answer. You want to figure out what happened to this bride on her honeymoon. You're looking for answers to the riddle that has haunted this couple's life, and trust me, by the end of this story, you'll know more than you ever expected. But, and this is important, I'm not going to give it to you all at once. Not yet. You need to experience the twists and turns, feel the tension, and walk through the shock with me. You see, the truth isn't something that can be uncovered in a rush. It has to unfold slowly, step by step, moment by moment. And that's exactly what we're going to do together. As we dive into the mystery, imagine being in the shoes of this husband, just moments before his world is turned upside down. Everything's been going according to plan. He marries the love of his life in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends, family, and everything he could have wished for. Then, they board the plane for the honeymoon, eager to start this new chapter of their lives. The anticipation is palpable, the excitement uncontainable. But then, poof, it all vanishes. What was supposed to be a dream vacation quickly morphs into a desperate search for answers. But here's the kicker, no one is even sure what to search for. Was it foul play? Was it something much more sinister? Or is there a completely unexpected explanation hiding just beneath the surface? Now, as you're sitting there, probably leaning in, your mind racing with questions, let me tell you this is a story unlike any other. It's not just a case of a missing person. It's a story of how love, trust, and the past collide in the most unexpected and unimaginable ways. I want you to really think about what you'd do if you were in the husband's shoes. How would you react if, after years of love and commitment, your spouse suddenly disappeared? Would you give up the search? Would you stay calm and follow the clues? Or would you dive deeper, no matter how terrifying the truth might be? And here's where it gets even more chilling. It's not just the disappearance that haunts this husband, it's the photograph. The wedding photo. You see, at first, the husband is convinced it's just a normal, innocent memory from a day that should have been the happiest of their lives. But when he zooms in on one detail, just one small part of the image, everything changes. It's as though the photo holds a hidden message, a clue that no one else can see. But he can. And once he does, it sends him into a spiral of confusion, fear, and shock. What does it mean? Why is it there? And why is it the key to everything? This moment, the moment he freezes in place, staring at the photo, is when everything takes a dark, unexpected turn. I know you're probably dying to know what happens next, and trust me, you won't be disappointed. But before we go any further, let me tell you, this video isn't just about solving a mystery. It's about uncovering hidden truths, questioning everything you thought you knew, and realizing that sometimes, things are far more complicated than they first appear. As we unravel the story, piece by piece, you'll see that there are layers to this mystery, secrets and motives you never could have imagined. The more we discover, the less you'll be able to believe. And by the time we reach the shocking conclusion, you might find yourself questioning not just the fate of this couple, but the very nature of truth itself. I'm not going to give you the answers right away. You're going to need to stick with me through this. There are twists, there are turns, and I promise you, it's going to get even crazier. The clues we're about to uncover will send you down a rabbit hole you won't want to crawl out of. I know you've got questions. I know you're eager to know what happens, but let me tell you something. The journey is just as important as the destination. So, stay with me. Let's unravel this together. Because by the end of this, the truth will leave you speechless. You won't believe what's actually going on. It's going to shock you, make you rethink everything, and leave you with a mystery that might just haunt you for days. The answers are out there, but they're more elusive than you could ever imagine. Now, I know you're wondering what happened to the bride. Where did she go? Why did she vanish? And most importantly, what's up with that photo? The secrets behind this case are far deeper than you might expect, and once you know the truth, you'll understand why the husband is haunted by that image. It's a game changer. But before we get to that, I need you to hear the whole story. Because if you think you know how this ends, trust me, you're in for a wild ride. We're about to take a deep dive into the mystery, and I want you to be with me every step of the way. Buckle up. You won't want to miss this. The truth is right in front of us, and it's about to reveal itself in a way you never saw coming. So, don't look away. You're in for a shock that will leave you frozen in your seat, just like the husband staring at that wedding photo. Are you ready for the truth? Let's find out together. But first, one last thing. What if the photo wasn't the clue at all? What if the real mystery lies elsewhere, in a place you least expect? Stick with me, and we'll uncover it. The answer might surprise you more than anything else. And trust me, by the end, you'll never look at a wedding photo the same way again. Stay tuned. As we delve deeper into this eerie mystery, let's take a step back and look at the man at the center of it all, the husband. His name is Jake. Just a few weeks ago, Jake was the happiest man alive. He had found the woman he was meant to spend the rest of his life with, his soul mate, someone he could truly see himself growing old with. They'd met a few years ago, in the most unexpected of ways. Jake was never the type to believe in love at first sight. But with Ella, something was different. She had this magnetic presence, a light in her that drew people to her, and before he even realized what had happened, Jake was hooked. Their connection felt effortless. They shared the same values, the same sense of humor, and even the same passion for adventure. It was no wonder that when Jake proposed, it was as if everything just fell into place. The wedding was everything they'd both dreamed of. Beautiful, intimate, and filled with the kind of love that made you believe in fairy tales. Their friends and family were thrilled to see them start this new chapter. Ella, radiant in her wedding dress, and Jake, looking every bit the proud groom, stood before everyone they loved, vowing to support each other, come what may. Their happiness was contagious. People who knew them said there was no couple more perfectly matched. But underneath this picture-perfect romance, things were far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Jake had always been a man who kept his emotions close to the chest. He wasn't the type to open up about his feelings or past struggles. It wasn't that he was hiding something, he simply preferred to keep things private. However, there was one thing about Jake that didn't go unnoticed by those around him. He had always been a bit of a loner. He had a small circle of friends, and despite his loving relationship with Ella, there were moments when he seemed distant, almost like he was carrying some sort of invisible weight. No one ever asked him about it. It wasn't like Jake to talk about his past. It wasn't that anyone doubted his love for Ella, it was just that there were always little hints, subtle things in his behavior, that made some of his closest friends wonder, did Jake have a secret? And then there was Ella. The woman everyone thought they knew. Beautiful, kind, and outgoing, Ella had always been the life of the party. But something in the weeks leading up to the wedding had begun to shift. Those closest to her, her best friends, her family, noticed a change. Ella had become more distant, quieter. She seemed distracted, like she was carrying a secret of her own. No one could put their finger on it, but it was as though Ella was no longer fully present, even though she was still the same sweet, charming person on the outside. Was it wedding stress? Was she just feeling the pressure of planning such an important event? Or was it something else entirely? When they arrived at their honeymoon destination, a private beach resort tucked away in a quiet corner of the world, it seemed like the perfect escape. The kind of place where you could forget the world and just lose yourself in each other. For the first day or two, everything was idyllic. They took long walks on the beach, watched sunsets that looked like something out of a postcard, and spent hours laughing over dinner. But something felt off. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Ella was hiding something from him. It wasn't that she was acting suspiciously, it was more like she was slipping into a different version of herself, a version that Jake couldn't quite grasp. Then came that morning, when everything changed. Ella had gone for a swim in the ocean, something she loved to do, but this time, she never came back. Jake, at first, thought maybe she had wandered off somewhere along the shore. Maybe she'd just gotten caught up in the beauty of the place. But after hours of searching, there was still no sign of her. No one had seen her. No one knew where she had gone. The staff at the resort were quick to help, but their search turned up nothing. That's when Jake felt the full weight of the situation. He called the local authorities, but even they couldn't make sense of it. She wasn't the type to run off. There were no signs of a struggle. And yet, Ella was gone, as if she had vanished into thin air. But here's the thing, this isn't a simple case of someone disappearing. It doesn't add up. Ella didn't just wander off. There's something more to this story. And it all begins with that photo. When Jake zoomed in on the wedding photo he had taken on the day of their ceremony, a strange, unsettling feeling crept over him. At first, he thought it was just the heat of the moment, the stress of losing his wife, messing with his mind. But then, he saw it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. A figure, just barely visible in the background of the photo, almost like a shadow, but something was off. It was the kind of thing that would go unnoticed by anyone else, but Jake was fixated on it. It didn't make sense. How could someone be standing there, in the background, in a photo that was supposed to capture a moment in time for just the two of them? And why had no one noticed it before? This photo, this strange, eerie detail, was the first clue, the first crack in the perfect story. As Jake delved deeper into the mystery, he started to uncover things that didn't add up. He learned that Ella had been in touch with someone just days before their wedding, a man she had met years ago during a trip abroad. His name was Adam, and though he wasn't a close friend of Ella's, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was something between them, something that went beyond friendship. Was Adam somehow involved in her disappearance? Was this man, whom Jake had never even heard of before, somehow the key to everything? Or was he just another red herring, a distraction to throw Jake off the scent? No one knew for sure, but the timing seemed too coincidental. Ella had been distant for weeks, and now, the very day she disappeared, Jake was learning more about a man from her past than he had ever wanted to know. But that wasn't the only strange thing. The more Jake talked to people at the resort, the more stories he heard. Some said they had seen Ella talking to someone late at night, near the cliffs, just hours before she disappeared. But the person she was speaking to had always been obscured by shadows. Others spoke of hearing strange noises coming from her room, soft knocks on the door, muffled voices, but no one could confirm who was there with her. The deeper Jake dug, the more the lines between reality and suspicion blurred. And then there was the photograph. The closer he looked at it, the more he realized that something was out of place, not just in the background, but in Ella herself. Her expression, while beautiful and serene in the moment, seemed almost distant. Detached, as if she wasn't fully present. Could she have been hiding something bigger than anyone could imagine? Had Jake been blind to something all along? The more questions Jake asked, the more everything seemed to spiral into confusion. Every lead he followed only raised more questions, and with each new detail, the mystery deepened. What happened to Ella on their honeymoon? Why did she disappear? And how does that photograph tie into everything? At this point, the mystery isn't just about finding Ella. It's about uncovering a truth that could change everything. Jake is getting closer to the edge, but with every step he takes, it feels like something, or someone, is trying to pull him deeper into the unknown. The clock is ticking, and with each passing hour, the truth slips further from his grasp. But what if the answer isn't what Jake, or anyone, expects? What if the true reason behind Ella's disappearance is far darker and more twisted than anyone could have imagined? Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Just when Jake thought he was on the brink of uncovering the truth, things took a turn that made everything harder to decipher. It's like the world itself was conspiring against him. Every lead he followed seemed to hit a dead end, every clue he thought might unlock the mystery slipped through his fingers like sand. For every step forward, he was pushed 2 steps back, and the tension in the air around him grew thicker. The first major setback came just a few days after he had started investigating more deeply into Ella's past. He had managed to get a hold of her old phone records, with the help of a contact he had made at the resort. There, in black and white, was something that stood out: multiple messages and calls from a blocked number. The messages were cryptic, but they were clear enough to give Jake pause. Someone he didn't know, was in constant communication with Ella, especially in the days leading up to the wedding. Who was this person? What did they want? The messages were full of vague references to meeting soon and it'll be easier this way, none of it making sense. Just as he was about to make sense of it all, the phone records mysteriously disappeared. One night, when he returned to his hotel room after a grueling day of asking questions, Jake was shocked to find his laptop was gone. The desk where it had been sitting was empty, and even the files he'd saved, those very same phone records, had vanished. The room was locked when he left, and he couldn't fathom how anyone could have accessed it. Panic set in. The staff at the resort, although supportive at first, were suddenly distant when he asked about the disappearance. They insisted there had been no sign of a break-in, and Jake was left to wonder, had someone in the resort staff been behind it? Or was someone else working behind the scenes to keep him from discovering the truth? That night, he received a phone call that only added to his growing sense of paranoia. It wasn't from the blocked number, but it was just as unsettling. A deep voice on the other end of the line told Jake to stop searching for answers. "You'll never find what you're looking for," the voice warned, its tone cold and final. Jake's heart raced as the voice continued, "Stay out of it, or you'll regret it. Some things are better left buried." There was no trace of who the caller was, and the line went dead before he could ask anything. He had no idea if this was a prank, an intimidation tactic, or something far more sinister. But what struck Jake most was the chilling certainty in the voice, as if the person on the other side knew exactly what he was digging into. And the more Jake thought about it, the more he realized how many people in Ella's life had been acting strangely. One person in particular kept popping up in his mind: the mysterious Adam. The man Ella had met during that trip abroad years ago. The one who had somehow wormed his way back into her life right before the wedding. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Adam knew more than he was letting on. He had been so elusive, so careful in his answers when Jake had tried to track him down, always just out of reach. When Jake finally confronted him, Adam's response was strangely guarded. He claimed he had no idea where Ella was, that they had simply been friends from years ago and that he had only spoken to her briefly in the days leading up to the wedding. But something about his demeanor didn't add up. His body language screamed that he was hiding something, that there was more to the story than he was telling. Jake pushed harder, trying to piece together why Ella would suddenly be so involved with someone like Adam and why her communication with him had seemed so urgent. But Adam's answers remained vague, frustratingly elusive. Jake wasn't sure if he was being paranoid, or if Adam was playing a much larger role in this mystery than he wanted to admit. Things took another strange turn when Jake started talking to some of Ella's old friends. He had hoped they might have insights into her recent behavior, or perhaps clues that would explain the sudden distance in their relationship before her disappearance. But instead, he was met with hostility. One woman, an old college roommate of Ella's named Tasha, became especially defensive when Jake asked her questions. At first, she seemed like she might be helpful, but the more he pushed for information, the more she seemed to shut down. And then she made a comment that sent a chill down Jake's spine: "You don't know the whole story. You never knew who Ella really was." It was an offhand remark, but it lingered in the air, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Tasha was hinting at something far darker than he had expected. Why had no one ever told him about this side of Ella? What was she hiding from him, and why had no one bothered to mention it before? As he continued to dig deeper, Jake found himself trapped in a maze of half-truths, conflicting stories, and mysterious figures who all seemed to know something he didn't. It felt like everyone was keeping secrets, each person playing their part in a game that Jake didn't fully understand. The more he uncovered, the more the pieces seemed to fit together in ways that only raised more questions. He was being warned off at every turn, pushed away by people who claimed to care for him and Ella. But why? What was the real reason behind Ella's disappearance? Was it something to do with her past? Or was there someone else pulling the strings from the shadows? Just when Jake thought he might be getting closer to the truth, he found something that shook him to his core: a journal. It was hidden in a drawer in their honeymoon suite, left behind in a place that seemed carefully chosen. The journal wasn't Ella's, But it was written by someone who knew her intimately. Someone who had been in her life long before Jake. The entries were cryptic, talking about things Jake had never heard of: long-buried secrets, forbidden plans, and a betrayal that seemed to span years. It hinted at a tragic event that had been carefully hidden from everyone, including Jake. What was this journal trying to tell him? What was the real story behind Ella and her mysterious past? The journal's final entry was the most chilling of all, and it felt like it was meant specifically for Jake. "You're too late. The truth is already gone. If you keep digging, you'll never get out alive." With that haunting warning hanging in the air, Jake realized that the game was far more dangerous than he ever thought. He had stepped into something much larger than he could have imagined, something that was trying to keep him from uncovering the truth at all costs. He knew that whatever had happened to Ella, the deeper he went, the more perilous the road became. But he couldn't stop now. The mystery was too compelling, and the secrets surrounding Ella's disappearance were too dark to ignore. The question was, would Jake be able to uncover the truth before it was too late, or would he, too, become a part of the chilling secret that someone was desperately trying to protect? The pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, but the more Jake uncovers, the less certain he is about who he can trust. The answers are out there, but they're buried beneath layers of lies, deception, and hidden agendas. Stay with us, because the biggest twist is still ahead, and it might be one you never see coming. Just when Jake thought he was beginning to piece together the shattered fragments of Ella's disappearance, something happened that threw everything he thought he knew into chaos. The world he had built in his mind, where everyone had their place, where he could follow the trail of evidence to the truth, started to collapse in front of him, as if the very ground beneath him was shifting. The first indication that things were spiraling out of control came when Jake's younger brother, Matt, got involved. Matt, always the more optimistic one, had been trying to remain supportive through the whole ordeal. He'd encouraged Jake to stay focused, to not let the fear and paranoia cloud his judgment. But Matt was about to become a part of the mystery in a way Jake hadn't anticipated. It started with an innocent phone call, one that Jake initially thought was a simple check-in. Matt had been living across the country, far from the tropical honeymoon destination, but he had been following the developments closely. He wanted to be there for his brother, wanted to offer support even from afar. But during their conversation, Matt's voice had an unusual edge to it, one that Jake couldn't quite place. He mentioned that he had been receiving strange messages too. Not just a single text or call, but a steady stream of unsettling notifications that mirrored the ones Jake had been getting: cryptic, threatening messages warning him to stop digging. At first, Jake dismissed it as coincidence, maybe just a prank, especially with the tension surrounding Ella's disappearance. But as Matt shared more, Jake's stomach sank. Matt had received an email, one that included a picture, one that looked eerily similar to the one Jake had zoomed in on, the one with the mysterious shadow lurking in the background of their wedding photo. The email didn't say much, but the subject line was enough to make Jake's blood run cold: "Stay away from the past, or it will find you." The sender was anonymous, but the implication was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting Jake, they were targeting everyone connected to him. And the stakes were higher now. This wasn't just about Ella anymore, this was about Jake and his family being pulled into something much darker than he had ever imagined. As if that wasn't enough, a strange coincidence began to gnaw at Jake's nerves. A day after Matt shared the details of the email, Jake received a call from an unknown number. It wasn't unusual at first, he'd been getting dozens of calls from unfamiliar numbers as the mystery deepened. But this one was different. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, almost as if it were trying to disguise its identity, and it wasn't threatening in the same way the other calls had been. This one had a sense of urgency, a warning, but it wasn't about telling him to stop, it was telling him to start looking somewhere else. The voice was clear, but the message was cryptic: "You're following the wrong path. The truth isn't in the past. It's in the future. But you won't see it until it's too late." Jake had no idea what to make of it. How could the truth be in the future? Was this some kind of twisted game? But the words stuck with him, and as he tried to make sense of them, he realized just how deeply this web of deception had ensnared him. It was no longer just about finding out what happened to Ella, it was about trying to figure out who was behind all this and why they were targeting him. Was he being set up to fail? Or worse, Was someone trying to manipulate the situation to force him into a corner? But then things took another strange turn. When Jake went back to his hotel room that evening, hoping to regroup and gather his thoughts, he found something that made his stomach turn. There, sitting neatly on his bed, was a package. No return address. No letter. Just a simple brown box. At first, he thought it was a mistake, maybe some misplaced delivery. But the moment he opened it, a chilling feeling washed over him. Inside the box was a wedding invitation, one that looked almost identical to the one Jake had sent out for his wedding, but with one stark difference. It was addressed to someone else. The name on the invitation was unfamiliar, Avery Sinclair. Jake's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Who was this person? And why were they being invited to a wedding that wasn't even supposed to exist? Jake's first thought was that it was some kind of sick joke, a way to mock him during the most vulnerable time in his life. But when he looked closer, something about the name Avery Sinclair hit him with a wave of recognition. He didn't know who this person was, but there was something about the name that felt like a thread pulling at the back of his mind. He had to know more. The more he thought about it, the more it bothered him that he had never come across this name before, yet somehow, it felt so familiar, like it was tied to something much deeper than he could understand. Was this a new lead? Or was it yet another distraction? Could it be connected to Ella's disappearance in some way, or was it part of a much larger puzzle that Jake had yet to solve? The mysterious Avery Sinclair, this name that seemed to haunt him now, had suddenly become the focal point of his growing obsession. But as Jake dug deeper into the mystery of Avery, he found himself uncovering unsettling truths about the people around him. There were whispers of betrayal, of people who knew more than they had let on, of relationships that had been built on lies, of hidden alliances that Jake couldn't yet see. Every person he spoke to seemed to have something to hide, something they were unwilling to share. And the more he pushed, the more they pushed back. At every turn, Jake felt like he was being drawn into a game he didn't understand, a game where the rules were constantly shifting. He couldn't even trust the people closest to him anymore. Matt had been receiving the same messages, the same threats. Was he being targeted too? Or was he somehow involved in something far darker than Jake had realized? Was the person behind these threats trying to isolate Jake, to make him feel like he was losing control, like he was slowly losing his grip on reality? As the days passed, the walls closed in tighter around Jake. Each new piece of evidence seemed to contradict what he had believed to be true just moments before. Was Ella involved in something more sinister than a simple disappearance? Was there more to the story than love, betrayal, and a honeymoon gone wrong? Or was the entire thing a carefully constructed trap designed to break him down, piece by piece? The more Jake uncovered, the more questions he had and the less he knew about who he could trust. What if the real mystery wasn't just what happened to Ella, but who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes? And who, in the end, would be left standing when everything came crashing down? Stay tuned, because with every new twist, the stakes grow higher and Jake's path to the truth becomes more dangerous than ever. The weight of everything that had been happening, the strange messages, the disappearing clues, the unsettling people around him, began to settle heavily on Jake's shoulders. Every step he took felt like he was walking through a fog of uncertainty, and the more he uncovered, the more dangerous everything seemed. It wasn't just about the mystery of Ella anymore, it was about his own safety, his own life, and the truth that now felt like an elusive shadow, one he couldn't seem to reach. He'd thought that if he kept pushing forward, the answers would come to him. But now, with every corner he turned, it felt like he was being drawn deeper into a labyrinth, where the walls were closing in around him, and every exit he tried to find only led to another dead end. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. At first, it was just a passing thought, a fleeting sense of paranoia. But as days went by, that feeling became more persistent, more real. He began to notice things he hadn't before, the same black car passing by his hotel every time he stepped outside, the figures lurking in the shadows of the resort at night, the subtle glances that everyone seemed to give him when he walked into a room. It wasn't just his imagination. Someone was following him. Someone had been tracking his every move, and the worst part was, he had no idea who it was or why. Were they working with the people who had sent him those messages? Or was there something much more sinister at play, something far bigger than he could have ever anticipated? The unease in his chest grew, gnawing at him relentlessly. It wasn't just the feeling of being watched that bothered him anymore, it was the sense that this was all leading somewhere, that the pieces of this puzzle were slowly forming a picture he wasn't ready to see. Every time he tried to escape it, every time he thought he could just take a step back and breathe, he found himself deeper in the web. Then, one night, things escalated. Jake had decided to meet with Matt, to try and make sense of everything. They were both on edge, both feeling the pressure of the situation closing in. They met at a small cafe just outside the resort, away from prying eyes. They had tried to keep a low profile, to avoid drawing attention, but it didn't seem to matter. As they sat down to talk, their conversation quickly turned to the unsettling events that had been unfolding. Matt shared more about the strange messages he'd been receiving, the cryptic warnings, and the feeling that someone was always just one step behind them. But before they could get too deep into it, Matt's phone buzzed. He looked down at it, his face draining of color as he read the message. For a brief moment, Jake thought it was just another one of those annoying, cryptic threats, another mind game someone was playing. But the look on Matt's face told him it was something much worse. Matt's hand shook as he turned the phone to show Jake the message. It was simple, but it hit like a punch to the gut. You're being watched. It's already too late. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he looked up at his brother, the weight of the message sinking in. They were no longer just in danger because of what they were investigating, they were in danger because someone was actively tracking them, hunting them. Every choice they made, every step they took, was being monitored. And whoever was doing this had no intention of letting them get away. It wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was about control. The fear that had been gnawing at Jake suddenly became a full-blown panic. He tried to hide it, to keep his composure, but the sense of dread that washed over him was impossible to ignore. What had they gotten themselves into? Was Ella's disappearance just the beginning of something far darker? Were they, too, now targets in this dangerous game? They barely had time to process the message before something even more shocking happened. As they got up to leave the cafe, a man approached them. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that seemed too formal for the place, and his expression was unreadable. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching them with eyes that seemed to pierce right through them. Jake's heart skipped a beat as the man finally opened his mouth, but the words that came out weren't what he expected. "It's time for you to stop looking," the man said, his voice low and deliberate. "This is your only warning." Jake's pulse raced. Who was this guy? What did he want? But before he could respond, the man turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. It was the kind of encounter that would have been easy to dismiss if it hadn't been for the feeling that lingered in the air, the sense that this was no random meeting, no chance encounter. This man was part of something bigger, and he had just issued a direct threat. Jake and Matt exchanged a look, both of them frozen in place. The warning had been clear. Stop digging. Stop asking questions. But how could they? Everything they had uncovered so far had only raised more questions. The disappearance of Ella, the strange messages, the shadowy figures, it was all too connected, too intricate for it to be a coincidence. But just as the weight of the situation began to sink in, a sudden realization hit Jake like a lightning bolt. Matt. His brother had just received a message, a clear warning, and now this strange man had approached them, telling them to stop. Was Matt somehow involved in this? Was he part of the reason everything was happening? Could someone have been using him to get to Jake, to distract him, to throw him off the scent? The thought was like a cold, sharp knife in Jake's chest. It made his blood run cold, the suspicion creeping in that maybe he couldn't trust the one person he thought he could. As the truth began to feel more and more out of reach, Jake realized that there was no one he could be certain of, not anymore. Then, just when things couldn't feel more uncertain, the unthinkable happened. Matt disappeared. Just like that. One moment, he was there with Jake, the next, gone. He had gone to the restroom inside the cafe, but when he didn't come back, Jake felt the knot in his stomach tighten. He searched the entire building, running through the rooms and corridors, but there was no sign of him. The door to the restroom was locked, and when Jake banged on it, no one responded. But the worst part was the silence that followed. Matt had vanished, and Jake had no idea where he had gone, or who had taken him. The urgency in Jake's heart escalated, and every passing second felt like an eternity. He was no longer just trying to solve the mystery of his missing wife, he was trying to survive it. Whoever was behind all of this wasn't just playing a game, they were trying to destroy him, to take everything from him. And now, with Matt gone, it was clear that the stakes had never been higher. What was happening to them? Who was behind it all? And would Jake ever be able to stop the madness before it swallowed him whole? Stay with us, because the truth is still out there, but it's slipping further away, and the danger is closing in faster than Jake can escape. Just when Jake thought the mystery surrounding Ella's disappearance and Matt's sudden vanishing couldn't get any more twisted, something happened that made him question every single thing he had come to believe about the situation. It began, of all places, with a phone call. Jake had been pacing the floor of his hotel room, his mind racing with thoughts of Matt, trying to make sense of how his brother could disappear in the blink of an eye. It felt like the walls were closing in on him, like he was drowning in this suffocating web of lies and deceit. His phone buzzed suddenly, cutting through the tension, and when he saw the name on the screen, his stomach dropped. It was the last person he ever expected to hear from, Grace, Ella's best friend, who had been at the wedding and had seemingly disappeared off the radar after Ella's sudden disappearance. Grace had always been a comforting presence in Jake's life, someone he could trust to help him make sense of the chaos. She had supported him through the wedding planning, and even after Ella went missing, she had been there until she wasn't. And now, out of nowhere, she was calling him. He hesitated for a moment before picking up, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and hope. Jake, Grace's voice was trembling, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right. You need to listen to me. Everything you think you know, it's wrong. Jake's mind reeled. Wrong? What did she mean by wrong? Had she known something all along? Had she been keeping secrets? Grace continued, her words rushing out in a flood. I've been keeping something from you, something that I should have told you earlier, but I was too scared. Too scared of what it meant, of what it would do to you. Jake's heart raced as she spoke, each word only adding to the confusion and fear that had gripped him. She was scared. What could possibly be so terrifying? And why had she waited this long to tell him? The silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity, before Grace finally blurted out the truth. Ella, she didn't just disappear, Jake. She left. The words were so unexpected, so utterly shocking, that Jake couldn't process them at first. Ella left. What did she mean? Jake was about to ask for clarification, but Grace's next words hit him like a hammer. And Matt? He's not missing either. He's part of it, Jake. He's been in on it from the beginning. Jake's world tilted. What was she saying? His mind swirled with disbelief, each sentence unraveling the very fabric of everything he thought he knew. How could this be true? Matt, his own brother. Ella leaving? The idea that Ella might have disappeared on her own accord was almost too much to wrap his head around, especially when every part of him had been convinced that she had been taken, that something sinister was at play. Was this all a lie? Was the disappearance really a setup? What was Grace trying to tell him? The conversation shifted as Grace's voice became more urgent, more desperate. You're not the only one being watched, Jake. I have been too. I've been trying to protect you, trying to warn you, but I couldn't do it alone. We couldn't. There was a pause as if she was considering whether to go any further, but then she continued, her words almost trembling. The truth is, there's something much bigger happening here. There's someone else involved, someone powerful. Someone we thought we could trust. Jake's mind was spinning. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but his voice caught in his throat. This was it, the turning point. This was the moment when everything changed. Grace wasn't just another piece in this puzzle, she was an unexpected player, someone who had been in the shadows, pulling strings, all along. His stomach churned as the implications of her words sank in. The idea that Ella had left voluntarily, that she wasn't taken as he had assumed, flipped everything upside down. It made Jake question his every assumption about their relationship, about the wedding, about the life they had shared. Could it be that he had been blind to something all along? Could it be that Ella had been hiding something so big, so dangerous, that she had felt the need to disappear to protect herself or others? And Matt, his brother, who had always been by his side, had he been a part of this scheme? Had he been involved in something so dark, so secret, that he had kept it hidden from Jake? The thought that Matt could be working against him was a betrayal so deep that it made Jake's chest tighten with anger and confusion. How could he not have seen it? How had he missed the signs? But before Jake could process the weight of Grace's revelation, a new twist emerged, one that would shatter everything once again. As he turned to leave his room, his phone buzzed once more, this time with a new message. It wasn't from Grace, though. It wasn't from anyone he knew. The number was blocked, and the message read only one word, Avery. The name struck Jake like a bolt of lightning, and the connection snapped into place. Avery Sinclair, the name that had appeared on the mysterious wedding invitation, the name that he had brushed aside as just another strange coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence at all. Avery Sinclair wasn't just someone from his past, she was connected to everything, to all of this chaos, in ways Jake had never understood. But who was she, really? And how was she tied to the web of secrets that now enveloped Jake's life? The more Jake thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to align. Was Avery the key to everything? Had she been pulling strings behind the scenes? Had Ella known her? Had Matt known her? And if so, how could Jake have missed it all? Just when he thought he had a grasp on the situation, just when he thought he might finally be able to piece together the truth, the ground beneath him shifted once again. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, nothing was what it seemed. His own memories, the people he trusted, the motives he thought were clear, all of it was a carefully constructed illusion. Someone had orchestrated this entire nightmare, and Jake was just one small, confused pawn in a game that was far bigger than he had ever imagined. As the full weight of the situation crashed down on him, Jake knew one thing for certain: the real mystery had only just begun. But who could he trust now? And was the truth even something he wanted to find anymore? Jake's mind reeled with the weight of everything that had been happening, the twisted puzzle that was threatening to swallow him whole. Every new piece of the mystery he uncovered felt like a double-edged sword. Each answer led to more questions, more dangers, and more confusion. What had started as a simple search for his missing wife had now spiraled into a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. And now, with this new revelation about Avery, everything was coming to a head. The lines between ally and enemy were blurring so fast that Jake wasn't sure who to trust anymore, not even the people closest to him. This was it, the confrontation he had been dreading. Matt was finally speaking up, but not in the way Jake had hoped. "What do you mean, Matt? What's going on? What aren't you telling me?" Jake's voice cracked, the frustration and desperation leaking through. He wanted answers, needed them, and he couldn't hold back any longer. But Matt just sighed, as if the conversation was one they'd had 100 times before, as if this was just another piece of the puzzle that Jake still couldn't see. "I can't explain it to you right now. You don't get it. You won't understand it, but I'm asking you to trust me, Jake." There it was again, the trust. Jake had been told to trust people his entire life, and each time, it had only led him into deeper shadows. How could he trust Matt when everything he thought he knew had been turned upside down? The very brother he had believed in, the one who had been by his side through thick and thin, was now asking him to turn a blind eye to the truth. "You've got to stop this search, Jake. Before it's too late." Matt's voice was stern now, his tone final. For a moment, Jake just stood there, frozen. His mind was spinning, heart pounding in his chest. Could he really stop? Could he walk away from everything, pretend none of this had ever happened, ignore the fact that his wife had disappeared under mysterious circumstances? The truth was clawing at him from every direction, but now, his own flesh and blood was warning him off, telling him to walk away. The weight of Matt's words hung heavily in the air, and for the briefest moment, Jake considered it. What if he was wrong? What if this was all a misunderstanding, and by continuing this search, he was digging himself and his family deeper into something dangerous, something beyond his control? But then, as quickly as the doubt entered his mind, Jake's anger flared. No. He couldn't give up. He couldn't walk away. Not when Ella's life was still out there, not when the truth was slipping through his fingers. "I can't do that, Matt. I can't just walk away," Jake said, his voice low but firm. "I need to know what happened. I need to know where Ella is." Matt's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. And then, just as Jake was about to press him further, a new voice cut in. This one, however, was all too familiar. It was Grace. "Jake, you need to listen to him. You need to stop this now." Grace's words were sharp, edged with fear, and they hit Jake like a punch to the gut. It was as if she was pulling the rug out from under him, again. He had trusted Grace, had leaned on her for support, for clarity, but now she was joining Matt in trying to convince him to back down. "Grace, what are you talking about?" Jake's voice rose in disbelief. "You're saying the same thing as Matt now? What is going on? Why are you both telling me to stop looking?" Grace's voice softened then, and Jake could almost hear the hesitation in her words. "Because, Jake, it's not just about Ella anymore. It's about you. You're in danger. All of you are. You've crossed a line you don't understand. Please, for your own sake, let it go." But that was it, wasn't it? Every single person he had trusted, every single person he thought was on his side, was telling him to stop. His brother. His wife's best friend. The people he loved and relied on were now urging him to quit, to give up on the truth, to step away from the dangerous path he had begun walking. They were all telling him to walk away from the only thing that still made sense to him. And then came the ultimatum. The voice on the phone, cold and final, told Jake that if he didn't listen, if he didn't drop everything and leave this mystery alone, there would be consequences. "You're running out of time," the voice warned. "You don't know who you're messing with, Jake. You're not just playing with fire, you're in the heart of it. One more step, and you'll regret it." Jake's mind raced. He was stuck between two impossible choices: drop everything, walk away, and hope that this all went away, or continue down this dark path, risking everything. His safety. His family's safety. Everything he had ever known. The truth had become his obsession, but now it was clear that the more he dug, the more he would lose. But the words that had haunted him since the moment this all started echoed in his mind. Ella didn't just disappear, Jake. She left. And what if that was the answer? What if everything had been in front of him all along, and he had been too blind to see it? Was he willing to risk his life, his future, and his family's safety to uncover something that might not even be real? Jake could feel the weight of every choice bearing down on him as he stood there, the phone pressed to his ear, his mind spiraling out of control. Was there even a right choice anymore? Or had he already crossed the point of no return? As the silence stretched between him and the two people who were supposed to be closest to him, Jake realized something else. The stakes were no longer just about Ella, or the mystery, or the truth. The stakes were about survival. And he wasn't sure if the truth was worth the cost of everything he was about to lose. Jake had thought the conspiracy was confined to his own family, to the people closest to him, Matt, Grace, Ella, but the more he uncovered, the more he realized how wrong he had been. What had started as a personal tragedy, a man searching for his wife, had grown into something far darker, far more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. He had been playing a game, but this wasn't just his game anymore. This was a game with rules he didn't understand, with players he didn't know, and the stakes were far higher than his own safety. As the walls of the world he thought he knew began to crumble, he understood now, there was no escaping it. The phone call from Matt earlier felt like a distant memory now, the warning to stop searching buried under layers of growing urgency. Jake had ignored Matt's words, Grace's fear, and dove deeper into the darkness. He couldn't stop. He couldn't back down, not when every piece of this twisted puzzle only led to more questions. But it wasn't until he received the email that everything hit him, everything changed. It was a simple message, subject line, "It's bigger than you think." The name at the top was one that made Jake's blood run cold, Avery Sinclair. Avery wasn't just some random name from the wedding invitation anymore, she was the thread that had been pulling all of them into this web. The message was a stark warning, a demand that Jake stop digging, but it was more than that. It was the final push that made him realize how inescapable the situation had become. There was no running from this. No turning back. Not after what he found. Attached to the email was a single file, a video. Jake's hand trembled as he clicked on it, the screen loading slowly as the words "video file corrupting" flashed across the screen. But the moment the video played, everything he thought he knew about the situation was obliterated. The footage was grainy, filmed with a hidden camera, but the faces were unmistakable. There was Ella, standing in a lavish hotel suite, her face set in a mixture of fear and resolve. And beside her, none other than Matt, Jake's own brother. But it wasn't just Matt. Another figure stood in the background, Grace. The three of them were deep in conversation, and the words that came through the speakers shattered Jake's reality. Ella's voice, barely audible, said, "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up, Matt. If Jake finds out," but the rest of her sentence was drowned out by static. Still, that one fragment hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. "Grace, what the hell is going on?" Jake whispered under his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had trusted Grace with everything. They had been friends for years, shared memories of Ella, comforted one another in their darkest moments. Now, it seemed like she, too, had been part of a plot, something that had been brewing for far longer than he could have ever imagined. The betrayal, the lies, it was all crashing down on him in waves. The truth about Ella's disappearance, Matt's involvement, Grace's role in all of this, it wasn't just personal. It wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was something far more dangerous. There were people involved who were pulling strings behind the scenes, people with resources far beyond what Jake had. The conspiracy was growing, sprawling out of control, and Jake realized, with a sickening clarity, that he had been a pawn in this game from the start. But that was just the beginning. As Jake's mind raced, trying to piece together what he had just seen, the sound of a door creaking behind him shattered his thoughts. He spun around, heart pounding in his chest. Standing in the doorway was a figure he hadn't expected. Grace. But this wasn't the Grace he knew. Her eyes were dark, her face drawn and tense. It wasn't fear on her face anymore, it was something else. Something cold. Something dangerous. "You shouldn't have watched that," Grace said, her voice low, almost a growl. The words hit Jake like ice water. She had known he would find out. She had been waiting for this moment. You knew?" Jake managed, his voice trembling, but the anger in him surged. "How long, Grace? How long has this been going on?" Grace stepped inside the room, her eyes never leaving his. "I didn't want you to get involved, Jake. I really didn't. But you had to know. I had to protect you from the truth, but it's too late now. You're in this too deep." Jake's mind reeled. "In too deep? What are you talking about?" The weight of her words, the chill in her tone, made his stomach churn. He could feel the floor beneath him shifting, his world tilting further into a nightmare. "I tried to warn you," Grace continued, the facade of calm slipping, revealing the raw tension in her voice. "But you wouldn't listen. You were so desperate to find Ella that you didn't see what was right in front of you. You don't understand who we're really up against. It's not just Matt. It's not just Avery. There are people, powerful people, who have been watching you. Watching all of us." Jake's pulse raced, his body stiff with shock. The pieces were coming together, but it was too much to process. "Who are these people, Grace? What is this about?" But before she could answer, the door behind her slammed open with a force that made Jake's heart stop. A tall, imposing figure stepped into the room. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man standing there. It was someone he had seen only in passing, someone who had always remained on the periphery of his life. Avery Sinclair. Avery smiled coldly, his eyes glinting with something far too calculating for Jake's comfort. "Jake, we've been waiting for you." The words felt like a trap, like a noose tightening around his neck. He couldn't breathe. "You've been asking too many questions, and now it's time to pay the price." Jake's mind raced for a way out, for something, anything, that could help him break free from this nightmare, but he was trapped. Avery, Grace, Matt, these people weren't just connected to Ella's disappearance, they were part of a much larger conspiracy, one that had entangled his life in ways he had never imagined. He had been blind to the forces working behind the scenes, and now, the consequences of his search were coming down on him with brutal force. Grace's face was unreadable as she stepped back, her eyes flicking nervously between Jake and Avery. Jake realized, with a sinking feeling in his chest, that she wasn't there to help him. She was part of the conspiracy, too. And now, the truth was slipping through his fingers, slipping away faster than he could grasp it. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he could have anticipated. It wasn't just about finding Ella anymore. It was about survival. "Time's up, Jake," Avery said, his voice cold as ice. "You should have stayed out of it. Now you've made it personal." And just like that, Jake realized the nightmare had only just begun. The weight of the situation pressed down on Jake, a suffocating force that seemed to drain the life out of him with every passing second. His mind raced, trying to find any escape, any way out of this tangled mess of lies and manipulation. But the truth was, there was no way out anymore, not for him, not for Ella. Not for anyone caught in the web that had slowly, painfully, drawn him deeper into its grasp. The people he had trusted, the ones he had thought would protect him, had been the very ones who had betrayed him, had dragged him into this nightmarish conspiracy where nothing made sense and everything had consequences. Avery, Grace, Matt, none of them were the people Jake had thought they were. The truth was far darker, far more twisted than he could have ever imagined. And now, standing in that room with Avery's cold gaze on him and Grace's trembling figure at his side, Jake realized that the cost of his pursuit of the truth was far higher than he had ever been willing to pay. "Why, Grace?" Jake's voice cracked, the question raw with emotion, as he turned to the woman who had once been his rock, his anchor. "Why betray me? Why play along with this madness?" His words were heavy with disbelief, his heart aching with the weight of the hurt she had caused him. Grace's face softened for just a moment, the hardness in her expression cracking, but then she steadied herself again, the cold resolve returning. "Because it was never about you, Jake. It was always about something bigger." She glanced at Avery, then back at him, her eyes filled with a sadness that was almost too much for him to bear. "I didn't have a choice. None of us did." Avery, who had been standing silently in the background, his arms crossed over his chest, finally stepped forward, his voice smooth and calculated. "You should have stayed out of it, Jake. But you didn't, and now you'll understand why this all had to happen. You weren't supposed to find out the truth, but here we are." His smile was a mask, hiding the cold cruelty beneath. "Ella, your wife, she wasn't just some innocent victim in all of this. She was part of it from the beginning." Jake's heart stopped in his chest. Ella had known. She had known all along. The woman he had loved, the woman he had married, the woman he had fought for, she had been part of this twisted conspiracy. His mind reeled as he tried to process the weight of the words, the truth crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Every piece of his life, every memory with her, was suddenly shattered, corrupted by this horrible truth. But even as the shock overwhelmed him, a single thought broke through. What about the others? Was there anyone else involved? Who else had been part of this? Avery's words continued to echo in his ears, but his eyes scanned the room, looking for some sign, some clue, that could explain it all. That was when he saw it. Just beneath the surface of the chaos, there was something else, something that hadn't been mentioned before. A brief moment of hesitation in Grace's eyes when Avery spoke. A subtle glance, a shift in posture that betrayed a deeper knowledge, something Grace wasn't telling him. Before Jake could say anything more, Avery moved with alarming speed, a look of amusement flickering in his eyes. "It's done, Jake. You can't change it now. The truth's out, and the rest. It's in the hands of people far more powerful than you. You're just a small player in a much larger game. But if you want to know how it ends, well, that's up to you." A sudden sense of urgency gripped Jake, as if he were standing on the edge of something, looking down into an abyss that he had no way of escaping. The door to the room swung open again, and another figure stepped in. This time, it was Matt, his face tight, his eyes darkened with guilt. He didn't say anything at first, just walked in and stood next to Grace, silently acknowledging the truth that had come out. Jake could hardly believe his eyes. His own brother. How could he have been involved in all of this? Matt's voice was low, almost a whisper as he addressed Jake. "You're not the only one who's been played, Jake. But you have a choice now. You can walk away, you can forget everything you've seen here and live with your life. Or, you can keep going. But know this, there are no happy endings in this story." Jake's eyes flicked back and forth between the three of them. Grace, Matt, Avery. All of them had been involved in some way, had known more than they had ever let on. And now, it seemed, he had a choice. But what was the right choice? What was the one that would give him peace, that would give him closure after everything he had been through? Jake, Avery said, his voice steady and unnervingly calm, this isn't over for you. But it can be. You can walk away. You don't have to carry this burden. His smile was almost pitying, as if he believed Jake could be swayed by such a simple offer. But Jake knew better now. The truth had already been laid bare. There was no walking away. Not anymore. With one final, defiant breath, Jake shook his head. No. I won't walk away. I need to know everything. I need to know who did this. And I need to make it right. He was shaking, his entire body trembling, but his resolve was unwavering. And as the room fell silent, Jake knew he had just sealed his fate. But the thing about truth was that it didn't always set you free. Sometimes, it trapped you. Sometimes, it was the thing that crushed you. The last few moments seemed to stretch into eternity as the weight of the situation settled over him. He was in too deep now, caught in a spiral he couldn't escape. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became he had already lost everything. So what did he have left to lose? And as the scene faded to black, a single thought lingered in Jake's mind, haunting him. What if the truth wasn't just a matter of knowing? What if the truth was the thing that destroyed everything you thought you knew?